Okay, good evening. Obviously, a lot to discuss for new viewers. Obviously, for new subscribers, of which we've had a few. Obviously, the rules are we have moderators. You've got to be subscribed for over 20 minutes before you can leave a question. That kind of thing. Just keep the chat tidy and try and keep the politics off the stream. Right. So let's get down to business. Let's discuss obviously transfer deadline day and the record breaking transfer window. Blood hair in the mouth. The record-breaking transfer window that we had this summer, which surpasses last summer's record by about 300 to 400 million pounds. That is insane. That's just for English clubs. That's not including all of Europe. Spending is up across Europe, apart from Spain, which is interesting as well. It's like the COVID pandemic didn't happen. It's like the economic slowdown we are having right now hasn't happened. So I do wonder about the sustainability of football club spending. We don't know what the salaries are going to be like. Mason Greenwood ending up at Getafe as a last minute loan deal. That's interesting, considering with the backdrop of what's happening in Spain right now, and obviously the baggage, the off-field baggage that comes with Mason Greenwood and the allegations against him. And of course, Southgate's squad selections for the international break have drawn a lot of criticism as well. Especially with Harry Maguire and Jordan Henderson, for example, being part of that squad. And there's been a lot of debate about Gareth Southgate overlooking uh, young, talented players who are getting a lot of game time, who are playing well, logging the minutes for uh, players like Henderson and Maguire, who clearly, I mean, Maguire, the potential transfer collapsed. He's still at Man United. He's a fifth choice centre back at this point. He's no longer club captain. So there's that. Yeah, Chelsea have spent about a fifth of all transfer spend in the last 12 months from English clubs. Is Chelsea? Um, they've spent close to £1 billion in transfers. Now they lost to Nottingham Forest. Huge question mark about Chelsea spending, the direction the club's taking. What's happening behind the scenes. This is a club that does actually struggle to actually make money. It's reliant on whoever owns the club to basically cover the losses. It doesn't matter who the owner is. At the moment, it's Todd Bowley. Before that, it was Abramovich. Before that, Ken Bates obviously had a big say on the direction of the club as chairman. This is a club that does regularly struggle to turn a profit, and the only years they have turned a profit is when they had transfer embargoes. So this is a club that's had financial issues for some time, and we'll see what happens with Chelsea and the UEFA spending rules that are coming in. The interesting thing is Spain's transfer spending is actually down, and I think the debts and the issues in Spanish football are starting to bite now. Um, that's why I think it's interesting that obviously with what's going on with the Spanish FA and the Spanish women's team and the scandal that's going on there and the internal struggles in Spanish football, that Mason Greenwood's been signed by a Spanish club. Admittedly, not a high-profile Spanish club, but a La Liga club nonetheless in Getafe. A lot of botty troll accounts leaving comments on that video about my views on it. When I have actually said he shouldn't be signed, I'm just saying, is it the right thing to allow him to continue his career? I was expecting him to go to somewhere in Europe. The fact he's gone to Spain with the backdrop of what's happening, considering the drawn out process to investigate from the last 8 months and reintegrate him back into the squad. If the charges were dropped when they were dropped, why has he not played since January? Why has he not been brought back into the team? So I think Manchester United were in a rock and a hard place. They've dealt with that situation badly. Um, this is a situation where another club, a rival club, Man City, very, very quickly got rid of Benjamin Mendy, washed their hands of him almost immediately. He was found not guilty in court. He had his day in court. Um, and they obviously washed their hands completely of him. And so the Mason Greenwood thing, it didn't get to court, which I think makes the situation worse. He hasn't fully cleared his name. The statements released by himself and the club contradict each other and themselves within those statements. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see if he can actually play well at Getafe. I think he might actually have Spanish defending is different to Premier League defending. The pace of the game is different. He's quite a quick pacey player. The style of play is different. It's going to be interesting to see how he adapts. I think they will, considering what's going on with the Spanish F. I think they will. The fact it's Getafe and a lesser club in Spain, I think, takes the spotlight off the situation. And it is a loan deal. Getafe are paying some of his salary. He's on quite a big salary, to be fair, for a player of his age. So it's quite a chunk of change that his contract is worth. I'm surprised Man United didn't buy him out completely and pay him off, and then he's just a free agent and he could have signed anywhere. I think they will care in Spain, considering the reaction with the Spanish FA and the Spanish women's head coach and the boycotts and the protests and the complete chaos that is Spanish football. I think we are going to see what the fan reaction is to Mason Greenwood. Look at the fan reaction in France to Mendy at Lorient. Fans weren't happy. They protested in the ground. Both home and away fans did not want him there. So, and he was found not guilty. So, and I remember the Stan Collymore incident all those years ago. His career never really recovered after that. He wasn't the same player. Yeah, I don't think he actually plays for Man United again. A lot of fan groups have basically said they don't want him to wear the kit again. Don't want to represent the club again. There's a reason why no other Premier League or Championship club, for that matter, was willing to sign him, um, because of other players in a similar situation who have gone to court or not gone to court. Like I remember Lee Hughes, who was convicted of death by drink driving. He was a former West Brom player. He never played again. I don't think. I think he might have played. Marlon King's another one. There's a few players who got into legal issues whose careers have never recovered ever. Um, So I think it Lee Hughes. I think it was Lee Hughes. He never played in the Premier League again. He taught, I believe. I think it was Lee Hughes. I could be wrong. I just still remember in the early 2000s, a West Brom player was convicted of drink driving. He had also killed someone in that drink drive accident. I think his name was Lee Hughes. His career never recovered. Um, yeah, yeah. I think it was Lee. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I remember it being in the news. It actually made a lot of news at the time. It was a high-profile case, um, because there was a fatality in the accident. It's like Alonso for Chelsea. His career has always been that he was involved in a death by dangerous driving case where I think a passenger in the car he was in was killed. Um, again, there were leaves Spain, goes to England to play because the negativity in Spain. But there's some players who've been done for betting offences, for example, who've had checkered careers, and then you have obviously what happened with, like, for example, Diego Maradona towards the end of his career, obviously with all the suspensions and drug tests and his off-field antics affected his career. Paul Gascoigne, towards the end of his career was he retired early, partly because of injury, but obviously the off-field issues as well, and a lot of it's the same in any sport. There are some. I think there is it Voyanov, the ice hockey player who won a Stanley Cup with the LA Kings. Domestic violence. He basically battered his wife in an airport. He hasn't played for a decade. He's still a registered. Well, the NHL refused to register him as a player. He's paid his dues with his legal side of things. He hasn't played for a decade. So Mike Ribeiro, alcohol problems, just never came back to play. And these are other sports and other leagues, so it's not just a football thing. Um, Israel Folau's career, obviously, with all his rants on social media about the LGBT community and his conservative right wing views. Yeah, he was. This is what I'm getting at with high profile athletes screwing up their careers because of non-sporting incidents. Um, yeah, Bellingham, he's a young player. Young players are like sponges. when it comes to learning the game and also learning bad habits. So Mason Greenwood's comparable age player. Bellingham is a gentleman on and off the pitch, very well respected, very well liked. Mason Greenwood, no doubt his talent. They're like sponges. So culture's a big thing. So and surrounding yourself with the right people advising you is a big thing. Bellingham decided not to play in England, goes to Germany, goes to a club which has a very, very good culture. Admittedly, Dortmund, they're not as successful as they used to be, but Dortmund has a very, very good culture. Um, and he's turned out into a very well rounded player and human being. Um, culture has, and so when I look at Manchester United and we look at the Mason Greenwood situation, they basically been the main focus of his life since he was at the under 11s age group. So culture has a big part in bearing on a player's development and off-field development as well. Um, so there's clearly an issue within Manchester United of a toxic culture. I think the same could be said for Man City with some of the antics of their players over many, many years. Culture starts at the top. Culture starts at the top. Now, it doesn't help that with Manchester United, the owners aren't particularly popular. They're very standoff. Um, look, he's played in the Champions League. He's played in a big league in Germany. He's played for one of the biggest, if not the biggest, the best supported club in Germany. Bayern Munich may be the most successful club in Germany. Borussia Dortmund has the biggest fan base. They are a very expectant fan base, and they're a very passionate fan base. If he can survive the Westfall Stadium at 90,000 capacity, I think he's doing all right. I think he'll survive the Bernabeu at full capacity. I think Bellingham is a very, very talented young player. Some of the crowds in Germany, the atmosphere, the ultras in Germany, the flares, the banners, the noise. If he can survive that, German ultras and German fans are very passionate, very loud, good good attendances even at Division Three level. Yeah, I think he can survive. The cauldron of El Clasico and the Madrid derby, no problem. Um, but he comes across as a very well spoken, very well rounded individual, and he's developed well as a player. He has developed very well as a player. Other players, not so much. And I think you look at, I'm going to say the last 10, 15 years at Man United, and that there are a lot of issues there. And, you know, players aren't developing as well. There's clearly an element within the club that is toxic. And now we've got Ten Hag in, he wants to clear out, refresh the squad, and that's fine. That's his decision. But who's actually making the decisions in signings? We look at the ownership and the antagonism between the ownership and the fans. Um, there's clearly things going on at Man United where culture starts at the top. The ownership are very vacant. They're not there. They leave the running to the CFO, the CEO, and the chief operations officer and the board. They don't really go to games. They're not really actively involved in the running of the club. They just, saddle it with debt. Chelsea, another toxic club, in my opinion, where there are issues. This time the owner's a bit more hands-on, the complete opposite. But what Union Berlin? Well, they were a third-tier side 5 years ago. They have a lot less money than Hertha Berlin, their biggest rivals. They are from the east side of Germany, where there is less money anyway. They're from the east side of Berlin, and from the former East Germany, where even now parts of East Germany are still struggling economically compared to the rest of the country. Um, yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's a fantastic achievement that they nearly won the Bundesliga last year, and they're in the Champions League, and that's only going to benefit them, I think, in the long term. They've obviously built a culture there that is positive. They work on a far smaller budget than Munich and Dortmund. Um, they don't have the same resources, but they have clearly done great scouting, great player development. They built the squad, they built the culture within the squad, and long may it continue. I think it's important that we get fresh faces in the European club competitions. I think it's refreshing that there are new clubs challenging for silverware, especially in a league like Germany, where it has become a little bit one-sided in the last decade or so. Not to the positive, not for the good of German football. I don't think, especially the national side. So it sometimes is refreshing. This is why when I do my club histories and we find clubs that have won silverware, admittedly a long time ago, it's refreshing to say, look, this league is actually, or this league system is a bit more competitive than you know the press would have you believe. There are more clubs that have had success in their history. So, for example, like East Fife, they've got four major pieces of silverware. Admittedly, it's a long time ago, but when we talk about Scottish football at the moment, it's just Rangers and Celtic. Or the fact that Scottish clubs have had a disastrous time in Europe and we haven't even reached the group stages of all the three major European competitions. Um, some of them haven't even made the group stages. So it's it is interesting to look at, and then you go to the European leagues. And go, well, this club was successful for a period of time, like Sampdoria. They had a 9-year window. They won everything in Italian football, played in some European finals, won a European trophy, and then the success stops. Sampdoria were the side for 9 years, and now they're in the second tier. Pochettino being sacked, look, I think it's unfair on Pochettino. But managers at Chelsea don't stick around long. I think that's a problem with the culture at the club. It's the win now mentality. Bowley has spent a lot of money, a hell of a lot of money, um, and there's no patience. And this is the problem with the modern game. They're not giving managers 2, 3, 4 seasons to implement a plan. They expect results. So I'm not surprised that coaches aren't sticking around. But the average tenure of a professional sports coach or a manager or a head coach continues to fall. I think the only sport where the average, or the only two sports leagues where I think coaches go above the average is rugby league and Aussie rules in Australia. Um, that's where I can see, because I think the average tenure is a year and a half now to 2 years maximum. You're talking about 18 months to 24 months maximum that a coach is going to be in the role. And this is where you get exceptions like, Ricky Stewart, Craig Bellamy. They are the exception rather than the rule. They have been in their roles a very, very long time. I'm trying to remember the Roosters head coach. What's his name? But a handful of coaches in the NRL have been there for 5, 10, Bellamy's case, 20 years. They're the exception rather than the rule. Um, but even so, there's Serraldo's signed a 5-year deal at the Bulldogs. You know, there's a plan there. They put a plan in place. And I think some of these coaches could be there for 5, 10, 15 years. There seems to be a bit more coaching stability for the majority of clubs in the NRL. There's some clubs that, like the West Tigers and St George Dragons, that are just going through coaches right now because that's the done thing. Um, Chelsea are really unstable. Look, this is a club that have only turned a profit in a couple of seasons since the 90s. They nearly went bust in the 80s. This is a club that's had, off-field dramas. Trent Robinson, that's the one. This is a club that's had off-field dramas for a very, very long time, for my entire lifetime watching football. They've had a lot of success since the 90s. Let's not doubt that. They've won domestically. They've won in Europe. They've won, Club World Cups. They've won a lot of silverware whilst being run very badly. Let's be honest on this. They've gone through a hell. Well, I need to look at how many managers Chelsea have had since 1992. I think you'll be stunned how many permanent managers have been in place in the Premier League era in 31 years. You're going to be stunned. The managerial turnover is far too high. How many players have played, first team football at the club? I think it's far too high. And there's a reason why they don't make money. They overspend on transfers, they're overpaying on wages, and constantly sacking managers and paying them out um, is a big problem. A few more years of this, and they will lose some of their fans. Well, they've always had a good fan base. This is one thing with Chelsea, and if you look at the club history video that I did, I think last year, they held the record for average attendance and highest attendance for 10 out of 15 seasons or something. There was a period of about 15 years, about 10 of those seasons, they were the best supported club for attendance. Um, in the English Football League. Admittedly, this is in the 1900s to 1920s period, 1930s, but they drew fans even then when they weren't winning trophies. They've always been well supported. They've got a good fan base. They are the biggest club in West London for fan base, and I know Fulham fans and QPR fans and Brentford fans would disagree with that potentially. Um, but they've always drawn well. It's very rare you see empty seats at Stamford Bridge. And we're going back to when the stadium was on the different axis. You look at old photos, even back in the dark days in the 70s and 80s with the hooligan element and declining attendances. Chelsea have always drawn well, but they do struggle financially. And there's a lot of issues with the club structurally. There's a lot of issues with the instability of who's going to be the head coach, the manager, the assistant manager, who's coaching the team, and squad turnover. Um, the development of youth players, they their youth system. Um, yeah, another player signing a 7-year deal. Some of these players are going to flop. Some won't, but a good few of them. Well, you want to tie a player up long term, um, because then you can build a core. If you get the right players and you scout the right players and you build a core, you can build a team around that. The best way to build a team is a couple of defenders, core midfielders. You build a spine, goalkeeper, defenders, midfield. You build a spine, a solid spine, and you can build a team around that. West Ham, top of the Premier League, yeah, they've had a good start to the season. People were saying they're relegation fodder and David Moyes could get the sack and all this. They've had a trophy that winning the Europa, the Conference League has given them a boost to start the season. They've now got that winning bug. They want to win more silverware. They want to challenge. I don't think they win the Premier League, but they could win the League Cup or the FA Cup and really give one of the cup or have a go in Europe again. They've got that winning bug. Now they want to add to that silverware. They want to maybe get their first league title. Do I think bigger YouTube channels have a negative impact on smaller channels? It depends. Honestly, it depends. I mean, look, the growth this channel's seen has been nice and steady. August has been a slower month. You'll notice that the subscriber count dropped below 1,100 twice and then bounced back up. Um, and I've stated that in the video I did earlier about it depends. Some of my videos have done reasonably well. It all depends. How can you describe a negative or positive impact? I mean, I've had mentions on other channels. Other bigger channels have mentioned me in videos, which means I then get viewers. I wouldn't say they necessarily have a negative impact. It's all about the content you create and how you engage with your audience, who will then word of mouth. Word of mouth can do a lot. What you will find if you make content that engages a lot of people suddenly, and even if it's a controversial video, like my Mason Greenwood videos have been doing really well, um, which surprises me really, but they've been doing quite well because they're controversial. The Paul Kent videos I did when he was, arrested, suspended, and they're still getting views now 3 months later. His trial date isn't for another 3-4 months. So um, the best thing you can do is get that word of mouth. So if someone stumbles across you, which most of you have, you know, uh, word of mouth, it helps. Um, check this out, check this guy out, that guy out, this etc. etc. That's how a lot of brands, make that momentum is word of mouth, or when you send a link to someone. So one of you could send a link, go, you've got to check this guy out. That person then sends that link to 5-6 people. They then, oh, I like what this guy. Oh, this guy's controversial, etc., etc. And you just build momentum by pure accident. So there's that. You don't get such good interaction with larger channels unless you have a lot of money. Yeah, look, I mean, in my, I, in my opinion, as I say, some of my videos have had decent views. I think it's like once a month or once every 2 months I get a video that spikes, does really well. I think the Rugby World Cup content's going to do rather well. I think we're going to get a lot of views later this month and next, and from now until November. I think the Rugby World Cup is going to get when I can watch games and do match reviews. I think the rugby content I'm going to do is going to do quite well. It's done quite well in the Six Nations. I think it will do well this autumn. I think August is always a down month for a lot of sports channels, personally. Um, so we'll see. You want to see what Getafe fans' genuine reaction to the Greenwood signing? I want to see what the reaction in Spain is going to be with what's going on with the Spanish FA. Look, as I say, I mean, does he have a right to a second chance? I could argue that. I think any club buyer beware. Basically, it's like when you buy a second-hand car, buyer beware. From like a private seller, it's buyer beware. I mean, oh yeah, it's got an MOT, but oh by the way, there's a bit of rough. It's buyer beware, really. If you were signing a player who is as controversial as that, an asset as controversial as that, there's gonna be some pushback. I would be surprised if there isn't some kind of eyebrow raising. Whether this loan deal goes well or not, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, he hasn't played for a year and a half. If Manchester people are saying, "Oh, Man United would have clearly wanted to keep him," then why is he out on loan? If they wanted to keep him, they would have got him back into the squad as soon as those charges were dropped. He would have been back in the first team squad, not only training but playing. So the fact he didn't play the rest of last season, the fact he hasn't done any pre-season with the club, go on the pre-season tour, the fact he's not started the season with the club, that tells you that things were going on behind the scenes that publicly the club aren't admitting to. Their statement contradicts itself and then contradicts his statement. Yeah, look, that's a proportion of Lorient fans. I'm not saying all the fan base. There might be some who just shrug their shoulders and go, "It is what it is," for good or for bad. Some fans won't care. Other fans obviously have been quite open in their opposition, and I think it's a it's a difficult one because he had his day in court and was found not guilty. So again, this is the difficult one. But players like Stan Collymore, for example, domestic violence. I think it was Lee Hughes went to prison for drink driving and killed someone. Some of the players with betting offences, like Ivan Toney, will his career recover or not? Because he's given these stupid podcast interviews, which I don't know what Frank, the manager, is going to say at Brentford. Is like he's probably ripping his hair out, going, "Oh God, he's stop." Will Ivan Toney remain a Brentford player? I don't think he will. I think Brentford will go, "Look, come on, you brought the club, you breached the contract, you brought the club and the game into disrepute. We don't want you anymore. Can we trust you to behave?" Um, we know some players like Maradona, for example, with his off-field drug and alcohol problems. Paul Gascoigne with his off-field drug and alcohol problems were like, this is becoming problematic. Um, and certain players come with baggage, and we now know what is coming out about certain former players and some of the antics and the culture within the sport. I think you could argue the sport does have, or professional sport, but in this case, football does have this rather hyper masculine culture within it. And there is a partying culture still, and we're in 20. But now we've got the social media partying culture. So they're more obsessed with their TikToks and their Instagrams and, look how much money I'm on my car. I'll be going to this night, VIP nightclub, that kind of thing. There's that kind of false arrogance. Whereas in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, it was a boozing culture and even into the 90s, the boozing culture, and it was just the lads on a night out on a Friday, playing on the Saturday hungover, get on the piss again straight. There was more of a boozing culture rather than going to the bars and nightclub, the higher end nightclubs. Now, with the money in the game, uh, I didn't watch them. I've seen one of them. I've seen one of them on social media, which is ridiculous. Dom Young, the Roosters have picked up a really good player there. The Roosters have picked up a good player. They are. It's going to be interesting to see how he fits into that Roosters side. Newcastle, I can't believe they didn't try harder to keep him. They're going better this season than the Roosters, but the Roosters is like one of those, what they're the NRL version of Liverpool being the culture club in the 80s and the 90s. It is a go-to destination for any player. Um, I'm going to have to watch the full match replay. I've heard both tries are ridiculous. I've seen one of them, the put down where he's basically on his back facing up and he's like in the air and he puts it down like that and he's looking in the air and the defenders come across. His legs are above his head and it's acrobatic in the extreme. But I've been watching some of the NRLW and some of their tries have been ridiculous as well. Um, and their skill set is improving week on week. Um, Luke McCormick, I think, yeah, he was another one. As I say, yeah, but there've been some, players in various sports. I mean, Srisanth, the Indian fast bowler, went to prison because he was enabling match fixing and dodgy gambling and had links to organised crime. He's still in prison as far as I know, um, and he was a pretty prickly character. Was Srisanth, brilliant fast bowler, but he could be all over the place. Or one, I used to watch the IPL religiously back in the day. Obviously, we had the Pakistani spot fixing scandal where two players are banned for life. One of them has only recently, not long, come back from his ban. Um, and again, you have to if you're a team manager or a team scout and you're going to the coach and look, we've got this player, he can do a role for us, but this is the issues that come with him. Can we weather the PR storm? Will the corporate side of it, the sponsors be happy if we bring him in? Will the fans be happy? Can we weather the pushback against this? Can we integrate him in? I mean, because in certain sports where money is a lot tighter and there's less of it around, I mean, it's like Bronson Sherry. He's just had a 4-year ban for doping. Um, he's coming back into rugby league next year. He's been signed. Now, at the time, there was a lot of, well, he's been doping since he was in the grades at under 16s. I mean, he's been doing it openly for years. This was a badly kept secret. What's the reaction going to be? Is he going to be welcomed back with open arms? It's a mistake, or is he going to be every time he gets the ball going to get abuse from the NRL fans? Um, oh, look. So it's and sometimes you get outspoken, and I'm going to get outspoken characters who openly criticise ownership, clubs, agents. It's like I'm going to mention CM Punk, the wrestler. He's currently with AEW. For how much longer we don't know. His relationship with WWE management, Vince McMahon, his departure, his spat with Colt Cabana, his former best friend, who he doesn't talk to anymore. I remember listening to Colt Cabana's wrestling podcast. We're going back like 5, 6, 7 years ago. This is after CM Punk famously, obviously, leaves the WWE roster and had his public sit down in the ring, legs cross-legged, or sit down on the ramp with the microphone. He breaks character. He actually talks like Phil. His real name's Phil something, and he just lays into the entire organisation, how it treats its stars, its talent, the backstage issues, the issues with workplace welfare. He then goes, I think, into MMA. And I think he went, was it Bellator or UFC? Didn't work out there. Currently at AEW, a lot of the roster at AEW don't want to wrestle with him, don't want to work with him, don't want to do promotional stuff with him, don't like him because he's outspoken and he's become different. He's almost blacklisted himself, and you get that with certain high profile players who blacklist themselves. So John Herdman openly criticising the Canadian FA, the Canadian Soccer Federation, and just saying, well, you then. He's basically blacklisted himself from international selection. So if Canada at the next World Cup and he's still playing, he's going to obviously boycott unless changes are made. And then you have what's happening now with Spanish football, where the entire women's squad and a lot of other players, both women and men at various age grades, have gone, we're not going to play until this is resolved. It may get resolved in the favour of the Spanish women's head coach and the FA suspended FA president, at which point you've just lost a whole load of players who are refusing to play. We've seen, but this is you know what I mean. You blacklist yourself. We've seen, well, obviously Mason Greenwood when he was on England duty, and Phil Foden when they misbehaved on England duty back during the COVID pandemic, when they're meant to be in the bubble and they snuck a couple of local blondies, as it was known in the press, some rather attractive young females in, and completely disregarded the medical bubble and the protocols, and basically disregarded curfew and behaved inappropriately. He only had the one England cap for a reason. It's not because of talent, it's because of his attitude. And we now know about other allegations that have surfaced and the legal issues he's had. He's basically blacklisted himself from every English, Scottish, and Welsh professional club in the top levels of the game in the UK. Who else? There was Cruyff famously boycotted the '78 Football World Cup, never played for Holland ever again. There's a few other high-profile players. Campese, the Australian rugby player, so difficult to work with. One of the best wingers the game has ever seen for his era, both league and union. And other players just didn't want to play with him because of his attitude. He was a prick character, he was controversial, and I think, like, can we be bothered with this individual? Israel Folau's basically retired himself because of his online outbursts. So you get it, where it doesn't matter if they've not done anything illegal, they might have done something controversial. So Tiger Woods, for example, sponsors dropped him with allegations about all the affairs he had in his private life. Sponsors dropped him like a stone. They were like, we don't want to be associated with this individual who tried to portray himself as this really nice, positive family man, but in reality, he's a love rat, and he's not particularly nice to his family. The sponsors dropped him in the wake of that. Lance Armstrong, for his admission to cheating throughout his career, banned himself for life. Why admit to it? Just stay silent. Like, you have a lot of really prickly characters who basically blacklist themselves from certain sports and certain leagues, and it's the same with some boxers. And I use CM Punk as the best one because he openly criticised his employers on a live pay-per-view in front of not only a packed arena but millions of people in the US and Canada and around the world who are paying for this pay-per-view, this live pay-per-view. He openly basically gave two fingers to the wrestling organized, the WWE management and ownership, saying, "Well, this is what." And I'm not saying what he was saying was wrong. I think there's a lot of truth to it, but there are better ways for him to to discuss these issues and get out of his contract. And now there's disputes in AEW against other wrestlers where there's been actual physical altercations backstage. We've seen it with Mario Balotelli. He was a very controversial player when he was in the Premier League with Man City. He basically ruined his career. He's still playing, but his career hasn't been the same player. Something like Joey Barton. He's another one. Not a particularly nice individual. He had a betting ban, which ended his career, and some of the stuff he did on and off the field was pretty reprehensible. There's been some rugby league players as well, like Ben Barber, for example, just got himself sacked by the NRL and the North Queensland Cowboys before even playing a pre-season game for beating up his wife on camera. Like, he didn't go get charged for it, but there's CCTV footage of him battering his wife outside a Townsville casino, physically beating the crap out of her. You know, there's been allegations about Sam Burgess's private life, and I don't think there's no smoke without fire. And he was pulled over with drugs in his system in his car. Um, there's a lot of incidents. There's a lot of incidents in the AFL. Ben Cousins, for example, I think he's the best example of the playboy, partying, drug ingesting, high profile player who clearly was not being looked after, was not being well supported and well advised. And the league basically tried to catch him. He never seemed to fail a test. And then it was his off field antics where the police got involved, where that was that. And he was the poster boy of the AFL. He was the best player in the AFL. He made his comeback and it didn't last. But I've watched the two documentaries about Ben Cousins, and they really do make you think. Are we really looking after some of these young men and women? Are we really supporting them in the right way? Are we really, you know, uh, making sure that we are not only helping them develop as athletes, but also develop as human beings and as role models? And yeah, he was the Diego Maradona. He was the Paul Gascoigne of AFL. Um, I think he's been to prison. He's had all sorts of issues. Um, but this is not just an isolated incident with one individual player at a high-profile team, high-profile player in a very high-profile league with Mason Greenwood. This is a much wider issue. Um, across the board, and there does seem to be still the partying culture. It's just how the players party. It's like Carl Walker. Some of the stuff he's been caught doing over the years. Um, you know, and then Moses Keane as well. There was a few players during the COVID lockdowns, like Grealish, some of his drinking antics. And people go, "Oh, leave him alone. He's only having fun." Getting absolutely destroyed every quite regularly. He's going to end up like the next George Best or Paul Gascoigne, exceptionally talented player, no doubt. Does he fit the Man City style and system? Probably not. He was a better. I think he was playing better at Aston Villa, but some of his off-field antics and carry on. I mean, look at Jack Wilshere. Never fully fit. Um, there was plenty of his antics that you have to raise an eyebrow and go, really? Um, are you being the most professional his career ended because he could never stay fit and sober enough for long enough to actually play a full season? He was always crippled. Um, I think so. When we're talking about the Mason Greenwood situation or what insert player here, Tiger Woods back in the day, Mendy. Social media now has made it where um, there's bias. So we've already made a judgment before a court of law or his employers, the club, have got all the facts. It's like the Alex Hales and Ben Stokes situation. Ben Stokes is now England captain, God knows how. Alex Hales has never really recovered as a player. Um, Ben Stokes is now revered as a hero. I don't like Ben Stokes, but you can't doubt his ability on the field. Off the field, I don't think he's a particularly nice individual, but the footage shows you what the footage shows, and if you've been charged with GBH or ABH, he gets a custodial. Being charged with a phrase, one of the hardest charges in the legal context to get a conviction in the court of law. It is pain in the arse to get a conviction for that. The CPS must have been going at the police and going, "You have given us a dead egg here. You've given us a duck. Yeah, you've really given us a really." Um, how Alex Hales got away with no charges is beyond me with that one because the footage is damning. The footage is bad. Yeah, I've watched Mike Bassett, England manager. That is hilarious. It's very good, tongue-in-cheek comedy. I mean, it's an old film. I mean, that film's like 20 odd years old now. Um, but that film comes out, and that's one of my favourite sports films. Because it's not really a sports film, really. It's more of a parody of. Well, it is, but it isn't. It's more of a parody of the situation England found themselves in at the time. This is basically a parody of the FA. Um, and you look at, like, when we had Taylor as manager, that's basically what it is. It's a parody of it's a parody of like Harry Redknapp or Roy Hodgson. Insert English manager like Steve McLaren, perfect parody, the Wally with the brolly. Um, because at that time England were massively underachieving with the talent that we've always had in this country. We've always had great players. Talent. We've got the best playing depth outside of Brazil. Um, However, we've massively underachieved on the international stage. Massively. For the talent that this country produces in one sport, which is football. Um, and it's a parody of that. It's a parody of the whole of the FA, the England setup, the chronic mismanagement, putting the wrong guy in the position. I mean, this could be a parody of Don Revie, for example, in the 70s, when Brian Clough should have clearly got the job. Is this the? But it's a great film. It's funny. You, Obviously, it's tongue in cheek, but it is the ultimate parody film. It's like Spinal Tap. Watch Spinal Tap, you'll understand. It's one of the best mockumentaries ever. It makes the Office, the US Office, look like an amateur production. Um, Spinal Tap it makes Wayne's World look amateur as well. Spinal Tap is absolutely hilarious. So well done. Ridiculous film, but it's a parody on the rock and roll lifestyle, and it came up before MTV came out, I think, Spinal Tap, but it's basically a parody on those 1970s, 80s rock bands, and the documentary makers following them around on tour, and it's just the ultimate piss take of the music scene in the 70s, and yeah, it's fantastic. Most low-key World Rugby World Cup build-up ever. Well, I think the media obviously have gone after Gatland and Borthwick here in the UK, because of the poor performances of England and Wales, and the squad selections, and the issues in the warm-up games, and how badly both sides have played, and the players suspended, and the players who've not been selected, and the players who've decided to retire or miss the World Cup for whatever reason. But rugby union's in a bit of a sorry state now. Ireland, France, Argentina, South Africa, and to a certain extent the All Blacks are miles ahead of England. Wales are not even close. I can see coaches losing their jobs personally. I've watched bits of the Graham Taylor documentary. That's when we were 1-0 behind to San Marino after like 17 seconds. And obviously we didn't make USA 94, and it did cost him his job. And he at the time, we'd come off the back of a disappointing Euro 92 campaign, where we didn't play very well. The Premier League was in its infancy. English clubs were still banned from European competition, so football in this country wasn't in a good place. It wasn't in a good place, and I don't think Graham Taylor was a bad manager. I just think he was given a no-win situation. He had some great players available to him, but he came at a time when the England national side is in transition. The game was in transition. Sport was in transition in this country, going from the old Football League setup to the Premier League and the Football League split. And there were issues with the sport in this country. There were massive problems in the late 80s, early 90s, and then he's put into this position. But then, Gary Lineker at the time was had just retired internationally. Paul Ince was just becoming the governor in a sense, just finding his feet in a leadership role. You've got Terry Butcher's there or thereabouts. David Seaman's just establishing himself as the number 1 goalkeeper. You've got Tim Flowers challenging for the position. Obviously, Shilton had stayed on 4 or 5 years too long. But then, yeah, some of the squad selections again. Gareth Southgate is the successful version of Graham Taylor with the England side. He's got to semi-finals and finals. Graham Taylor didn't get to the tournament, but yeah, players like Dennis Wise and Jeff Thomas did get in there because Graham Taylor had a style of football that wasn't suiting the transitional. He was the Roy Hodgson of his day. He was the only guy really available to take the job, and he was the only guy willing to take the job. That was the problem. He was the only guy willing to be, in the firing line. No other manager was willing to put their hand up and put their head above the parapet and go, I'll give that a go. They had their window. If they got Brian Clough when he was available, the conversation we would have been having would have been totally different. The FA screwed up when they didn't get Brian Clough in as manager and they went with Don Regan. That's my opinion on that one. When we had Bobby Robson, obviously, that's where the mistake was made. And we've been paying for that mistake for 45 years, 50 years. I wouldn't say the whole team was shocking, but it was a team in transition. So he's gone, right, okay, I need some box-to-box defensive midfielders. We need to have some solidity in midfield. We need some agitation in midfield. We've lost some good players who've retired. Other players are not, like their form's dropped off. No one does. I've got nothing against Maguire. I've got nothing against Calvin Phillips. Calvin Phillips has had a lot of injuries, and he hasn't really. Leaving Leeds was a mistake. Man signing him for Man City. His agents obviously made a lot of money. He's not getting game time. Any other club he would be starting week in, week out. That would have worked better on his fitness issues. He would be getting paid less, but he'd be doing a lot better than he is right now, and he wouldn't be stuck not playing. Maguire, it's all gone wrong at Man United. I think that's plain and obvious. It's not worked the entire time he's been there. Wrong player, wrong club. Hasn't worked. It has affected his performances for the club. I don't think Maguire's a bad defender. I don't think he's world class. I think he's solid. But he's had a shocker at Man United. That has been a terrible relationship. He was good at Hull, good up and coming at Hull. He was good at Leicester. But it is what it is. Graham Taylor, he'll be the manager that failed to get. Well, it's like Steve McLaren failed to get us the Euros in 2008. Graham Taylor had a good sense of humour, but he was the only guy at the time willing to take the job on. That was the problem. The game is in transition. The squad was in transition, and he was the only guy willing to put his hand up and face the firing squad, and the media, and deal with that. Maguire was overrated at Leicester. Well, he had Wes Morgan to bail him out. This is where I think Maguire is a solid defender. He needs a senior partner alongside him, a better quality defender or a more rounded player alongside him to get him out. Well, look, Eric Ten Hag. Eric Ten Hag is clearly wants to overhaul the playing squad and the leadership group. I don't think they've got the right characters at that club. They don't have a Paul Ince. They don't have a Roy Keane type leader who lays down. They don't have a governor or Roy Keane. There's a reason why Paul Ince was called the governor. There's a reason why Mark Hughes was called Sparky. There's a reason why Roy Keane was the leader. They don't have an Nemanja Vidic. They don't have that hard man. They don't have the guy who lays down the law. Not the best player, the best leader. They don't have that. They don't have that steely player or players because Sparky did play with him, I believe. They don't have that group of players who are gnarly. They're toxic. But they did the same with Gascoigne. They did the same with Beckham. Um, they hound some of the best players. They go after some. Like Harry Kane, they go after him and then they drive them out of club and league. You know. Oh, what? Well, the way they treated Graham Taylor, the press, they treated him like and absolutely terribly. They were vilified. It was disgusting what the press did to Graham Taylor 30 years ago. It was disgusting what they did to Steve McLaren 15 years ago. It was shocking. It was unacceptable. They were really hounded, and they were hounded out of their jobs. And Steve McLaren basically went, "Sod it, I'm going over to European football. And Graham Taylor went, "Okay, I'm going out of management for a while. Then I'm taking a step back." You know, and it did affect them. And Graham Taylor, okay, he managed Watford again, and it was tough when they got back to the Premier League. It was tough, um, but they got absolutely and Steve McLaren doesn't have a good relationship with them at all. They got hounded, and I think they did have an impact on their management, and it did have an impact on their managerial careers. It was the same with Sven though and Capello. They were the foreign guys. They were the easy target. Well, the FA have decided to go down this route. Roy Hodgson, he got a hammering. That guy knows more about football than we ever will. He's coached, I think, 8 different countries and I think 4 different national sides and speaks 5 different languages. They were Roy Hodgson, and his famous blow up to the match of the day guy or the Sky Sports guy, where he basically says you're being tricky here. I don't. I mean, he f's and blinds because he's had enough. Um, it's like the situation with what player is it? Paqueta with David Moyes. David Moyes has had a bit of a prickly relationship with the media, but Paqueta in the US, what he don't say so much. Like, there's an active investigation into Paqueta by a couple of FAs, I think, into what you know, Southgate. He's started to have a bit of a prickly one with the media now, but he's dug his own hole by his statement pre-Qatar, and now obviously he selects the players playing in Saudi Arabia. And I listened to his interview he gave on Talksport, and but look, it's the whole mainstream media. It's not just this country, but the mainstream media. We've seen spats between coaches and media before. It's Larry Brooks and John Tortorella. They're ongoing, spat go, going on for the best part of 20 years. To the point where John Tortorella now refuses outright to answer his questions. Um, because he's had enough of an antagonistic journalist who's writing clickbait articles, slandering him in the press. He's just going, belittling him. He just goes, I'm not going to answer your questions. I'm refused to answer the questions from your publication. Which made his time in New York very interesting. It made his time in Tampa quite interesting. I think it made his time in Columbus quite interesting, although he had chilled out by the time he was at Columbus. But John Tortorella in the NHL, his Larry Brooks, I think is it the New York Post or the New York Times, the sports section? He really does not like John Tortorella, and John Tortorella doesn't like him. And it got to a point where I believe if Larry Brooks was in the press conference, he would just refuse if their media, if the team's media people were like, "You've got Larry Brooks," he was like, "Well, I'm not answering this question. He can write whatever he wants. I refuse to talk to him." Um, because obviously, if your media commitments, and this is what I don't like, um, they're contractually obliged to do media commitments. They get fined if they do no shows, and so you'll see coaches blow up and go, I'm leaving," and they get fined. And you'll see it in rugby league, you'll see it in football, you'll see it in rugby union, you'll see it in the NHL. You will see a coach blow up, and you'll go, "Right, that's it. I'm not doing a press conference. F you. I'll take the fine. I'm refusing to answer your questions." He'll give a brief that I'm not answering anything. Because, quite honest, you've just had a really bad game, bad defeat, or there's been a bad injury, or something's happened, and it's right off 15 minutes, and you've got microphones there, and you've got to do your press conference that may last anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, and you've got to be in there. And you're like, you know what? Do I want to be here? No. Do I want to work with players, with my coaching staff? We've got to digest this result. That's what I, I'm only here because I'm contractually obliged to be here, but I don't want to be here. You can tell. Same with players who've got microphones shoved in their faces. They've just been hammered 40-0, for example, in the NRL. Um, it's almost like switch it off. Do I ever listen to Talksport during 10 to 1? Is that Simon Jordan period? I don't mind Simon Jordan. He's kind of interesting. I don't agree with everything he says, but I'm agreeing with Simon Jordan a bit more now than I used to, which I'm worried about. You don't mind Jordan Henderson in the England squad? He's playing in Saudi now. If he's there next year, I think Southgate's lost it. I mean, Jordan Henderson, yeah. The Gattuso one. Sometimes good, sometimes maybe shit. The best one I think I've seen with a press conference where it blew up was Trapattoni when he's the Bayern Munich manager, and he goes into it, he blows up, and he throws his whole team under the bus. And Trapattoni, you'd think his German wouldn't be great. He speaks fluent German, like he was a member of the SS, and he's on a podium. It was one of the that's jokes aside. Joking aside, Trapattoni's rant when he was Bayern Munich manager, I think was it 98 or 99. They haven't had a great game. They've I don't know. It was a league game, I think, a Champions League game. They've not had a great game. They've been humbled at home. He's got to give this press conference. He doesn't want to give the press conference. He wants to basically execute the entire squad. By the sounds of it, he was fuming, but he's contractually obliged to. And then he comes out and goes, "I'm not happy. We've lost," and then he's obviously just blown up, and he's just gone, "Fuck it. I don't care. I don't care how many Deutschmark they're going to fine me," because this is pre the Euros. This is pre 2002. Because I don't care how much I get fined by the German FA. I'm just going to explode. I don't care. I don't think he even cared. I don't care how much I get fined by UEFA, which would be Swiss francs. He just went UEFA, which would be Swiss francs. He just went bananas. One of the greatest meltdowns in history. Then you've got Ricky Stewart in the NRL. He has meltdowns on a weekly basis. Then you've got Wayne Bennett, he will just go, "I'm not answering that." Just give one word answers to the media. Then you've got in the NRL, John Tortorella just having his meltdowns and rants. And then some of them are hilarious. Oh, the Eric Cantona, when the trawlermen go out to sea and the seagulls come. The reason why he called them the trawlermen, the seagulls come, the trawlermen are the players. And the fans and then the coaches. The seagulls or the gannets, they're the media. They're just the hyenas. They just hoover up all that was him giving two fingers to the British press. One of the and I'm only a little kid at the time, only like 6 years old, and my mum was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Eric Cantona's gone mad. He's talking about seagulls. Why is he talking about seagulls?" And I think my mum was like, "I don't know." And you have to watch it back now. You watch it back now. That is a veiled two fingers to because I think that is a French saying when the trawlermen go out to sea, the seagulls come, seagulls follow. That's I think a French saying from the Marseille Nice area, that part of France. When the fishermen go out, the seagulls follow. But it basically was a veiled, two fingers, an FU to the British press. absolutely. There's been some great ones like the Detroit was it the Detroit Lions playoffs. We got to win a game. Um, they were who we thought they were. The Arizona coach. They were who we thought they were. Um, you know, there's been some great blow ups with coaches. Um, like Jeff Tuvey. I think there was a player who there was a dodgy call. The referee got a call wrong. Because you can't be serious. You can't be serious. And there's got to be an investigation. Someone's got to be held accountable for this. Jeff Tuvey's rant was quite a good one. I think it was back in 2014, 2015. Um, Trent Robinson's had a few where he's gone after the league and he's criticised refereeing decisions and he's criticised rule changes. Normally when the Roosters lose, but even when the Roosters win, he goes after them. I think Craig Bellamy's had a few blow ups. There's been some of the NRL ones are hilarious. There's been some AFL ones as well. Oh, what the pre-fight build-up? That's a circus. Same with UFC and Bellator. I can't stand that. The pre-fight circus. It it devalues the sport. There's a lack of respect. And then you do actually get those young fighters coming through the boxing ranks or the martial art ranks, kickboxing or MMA, who then do that deliberately because it's seen as acceptable. Um, I wouldn't say all of them are fake. There are some, certain teams and certain boxers or whatever the sport is who generally don't like each other, and it is a general dislike, and they do say stuff. And then the press will spin that and build the rivalry, and then the fans get involved, and that gets nasty. But there are definitely certain boxers or certain tennis players or snooker players, darts players, football clubs, rugby clubs, head coaches who don't like each other, um, team owners who don't like each other, promoters. Doesn't matter what the sport is. The media will then drip feed crap out. Do you hear what this guy said about you in a press conference? They'll cherry pick about something, and then they build it and they overhype. I, to be honest, I think it's disrespectful. I think it gets out of control. Um, Certain teams really don't like each other. Certain fan bases. I mean, there are certain sports rivalries where the fans don't like each other, let alone the players on the pitch. And then you get that player who crosses over, like Luis Figo going between Barcelona and Real Madrid. That really ignited the rivalry between the two clubs, which already they hate each other, and that goes back a long time. And the fan bases don't like each other, and it got nasty. It got really nasty. Um, you know, it was quite. I mean, the pig's head incident when they smuggle a pig's head into the Bernabeu, or was it the new? But an actual pig's head they managed to smuggle past security and lob at Luis Figo. Also, these delightfully smart hooligans lobbed their mobile phones at Luis Figo. Now that's thinking. Um, who do I support in what sport? In what sport? Because I have a few teams that I follow in a couple of sports. Um, Let me just get the time. Oh god, I've paused that bloody. Um, it depends on the sport, but in the NRL it's the Canberra Raiders. In the football, in European football, it's Blackburn Rovers. In in ice hockey, it's the Winnipeg Jets in the NHL. Um, there's certain players that I like who play on teams that I don't support. So when I when I see a player do well, I'm like, that's actually it's kind of rewarding when you see a player do well that you like. They may play like Ovechkin. I don't like the captain. For him to win a Stanley Cup and to be one of the greatest pure goal scorers the NHL's ever seen is fantastic. Um, there are some good players playing, like Eric Carlson. I love Eric Carlson. Admittedly, he's playing for the Penguins. I can't stand the Penguins. I don't particularly like the San Jose Sharks, but he's one of my favourite offensive defensemen. Like the guy is 2017 playoffs was playing on one leg. Um, you know, um, and some of the injuries he's had his issues. Eric Carlson playing on one leg in 2017, and that alley oop pass where he literally just lobs it in the air the length of the rink and knows they score. It's just he can do magical things on the ice. But it's Spain. I mean, these are fans who openly are racist against their own players who are winning them championships. These, uh, you know, there is Spanish football is a toxic culture. But yeah, lobbing your phones a player and a player. Well, I think it was funny because I think Real Madrid were actually sponsored by, well, I can't remember who, Siemens, and they were making mobile phones at the time. So it's ironic that the Barcelona thugs are attacking Figo with mobile phones when the main title sponsor of Real Madrid is a mobile phone company, mobile phone manufacturer. I just thought that was ironic, but how they got a pig's head in. But it's like the AC Milan Inter Milan incident where Dida was hit with the flare and then they're lobbing. All these items are banned inside stadium. How the hell you get a pig's head? And it wasn't a small pig's head; it was quite a sizable piece of pork. I mean, into the stadium. Security. That was an amazing one. I remember Jamie Carragher during an FA Cup tie. I think it was Arsenal Liverpool, and he got a coin thrown at him and he threw it back into the crowd in that really nasty FA Cup. It was it was a replay of the finals. I think it was in 2002. So the final in 2001, Liverpool beat um, Arsenal 2-1. Michael Owen obviously is at the peak of his powers. Arsenal were winning that game 1-0, and this is the Arsenal Invincible season after. And this is that hybrid, a coin. It's an ill-tempered match, really nasty match. There are players sent off. I think Liverpool had two players sent off. Arsenal had one player sent off. It might be the other way around. But I remember the coin hits him and he picks it up and he throws it back. I think he got a lengthy suspension for that. I think he got 5-6 games for that. Just you know, there are some times where you have a set of fans that don't like each other. It really is pure hatred. And then a player does something stupid, or a player has that transfer or that trade or that signs that contract with the rival team, and it just inflames it more. Um, it was like when Fernando Torres leaves Liverpool, ends up at Chelsea, and the Chelsea fans hate Liverpool anyway because of the Luis Garcia phantom goal a few seasons prior. Yet without Fernando Torres, you don't win the Champions League. Yeah. That goal against Barcelona, um, he was never really fully fit. It didn't work, but he wasn't accepted by Chelsea because of his time at Liverpool. Um, and it just was one of them. And then Rafa Benitez goes there. He's not accepted either because he was the manager of Liverpool at the time. Um, how? Because French security is a joke. That's how. Have you seen the Stade de France? The security there is laughable. Look at the problems that have happened at football matches. It's not Paris; it's Saint Denis. It's a suburb which has got a high crime rate, lots of gangs, and what we saw with the Champions League final not long ago. There, it's not a particularly well sited stadium. There's been issues at the Parc de France for many years. Um, there's a lot of it's in a very deprived area of Greater Paris urban area. There's a high crime rate, and the security is shocking. Look, they get flares in there. Um, they they get all sorts. It's they don't care. The security don't care. Um, you're lucky you get into the stadium with your wallet without being pickpocketed outside the stadium or stabbed. It's true. You're lucky you get into the stadium with your wallet without being pickpocketed outside the stadium or stabbed. It's true, and a lot of French people have basically highlighted this stadium is in the wrong place. Um, oh God, my cousin was at a Southampton Portsmouth FA Cup tie back in 2010, and he came to my house after the game, and he had a massive dent there, and he'd been hit with a 50p piece in the middle of his forehead, and he'd split him open, and I was like, shit, like that was like, what? How have you ended up pissing blood all over me? Oh, and you've been on the train for like several hours like this. Several trains later, he instead of just coming straight to mine, he was visiting for the week. He decided to get an FA Cup, third round match in, and get involved in the football riot. And this Pompey hooligan went in his pocket and just got a fistful of coins and just launched them, and one of them just got him straight in the forehead, and yeah, they hurt. Getting hit with a coin, I mean, they're bits of nickel and copper. They split you open. They're not particularly nice. Um, but no, yeah, Saint Denis area of Paris, you don't want to go there. But Paris as a city is a horrible city. It really is. People think, oh, it's the city of love and it's the eternal. No, it's a shithole. It's a dirty, dirty shithole. And I think a lot of French people outside of Paris would agree it is a terrible city. A lot of French people in regional France don't like going to Paris. It's not particularly pleasant. It's like us in the UK with London. London and Birmingham, they're horrible places to go to as well. There's a lot of issues that the tour brochures don't tell you. So there's a lot of problems. Um, in regards to rivalries in the individual sports, it's like Connors and McEnroe in the late 70s, early 80s in the tennis. They hated each other. Two of the best American players ever. They physically they hated each other. They produced some of the best tennis we've ever seen. They wouldn't even say a word to each other in the locker room before or after a game, even if they weren't playing at the same time. They were cross paths and they would just not look at each other. They really hated each other. Certain golfers who played in the Ryder Cup, either on Team Europe or on the US team, don't like each other. Sergio Garcia doesn't get on with a lot of the European players or the American players. There's a few American players who don't get on with each other. Uh, I think Vijay Singh and Tiger Woods openly dislike Sergio Garcia. They really don't like him. Um, there's Ian Poulter and Lee Westwood aren't particularly well liked on the tour. Um, and then you've got John Daly, who just does not care if you're liked or not liked. Even their sons, Ben and Eubanks' kids don't like each other. And the feud between the two is quite open. Uh, Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank, they really don't like each other. Their two sons don't like each other. It's not just a rivalry; it's a pure dislike. And there is organised. There are some criminal elements with that as well. If you watch Rise of a Foot Soldier, that's um, Nigel Benn's son who knocks the guy out. Who's playing Nigel Benn? It's his son, the Dark Destroyer. That's Nigel Benn's son, who's also a boxer who knocks out um, the gang member before he goes to Holland. He puts him in the neck brace. That's Nigel Benn's son, who failed the drugs test when he was going to face Eubank Jr. That's true. But the Ben Eubank feud continues today with their kids, who are also pro boxers. You got Warren and Hearn as the promoters. Oh, who knew? They don't like each other either in the boxing world. So, yeah, generational feuds can continue. Mick Foley and Hulk Hogan don't like each other in the wrestling world because Hulk Hogan gave an interview. Oh, we're talking about 20 odd years ago now when Hulk Hogan was still wrestling when he came back after he was in WCW, goes back to WWE, and Mick Foley was like, and this is after near the end of their wrestling careers. Hulk Hogan goes, for 30 years I've been in the gym training every day. Mick Foley's fat, basically a fat slob, and then Mick Foley responded by going, "It's like I'm a better wrestler than you, though," which is true. There are some within certain sports, certain sporting industries, who don't like each other. Dennis Wise is not well liked by a lot. It's like Fashanu and Laurie Sanchez, who were in the same Wimbledon side, hated each other. It's Vinnie Jones who kept the peace. Um, so there's that. There's all sorts. Like there's certain. It's like the Rabbitohs and the Roosters in the NRL. Back 20, 30 years ago, if you're walking down the wrong side of a certain street in Sydney, you are getting hurt. Yes, Tony Tucker was security for Nigel Benn on his championship winning night. I think was it in '95, in January '95. He was on his training camp in Marbella as well. There's a famous photo of a couple of the lads who were the Essex boys, well, and they're some of their associates. There's a couple of very famous photographs of Nigel Benn out in Spain in Marbella with Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe and oh god, the other guy, Pat Tate, and a few of the others, their associates, out in Spain. There's some very famous photographs of them out in Spain, and of course that with Nigel Benn, it raises questions about various things to do with boxing in regards to its association with organised crime and the criminal underworld. Um, I've got books on it. I've actually got books. I've got a lot of the films, not just the Essex Boys and Rise of a Foot Soldier and Bonded by Blood. There's a couple of books that I have that allude to with some of the hooligan firms that also were linked um, to the criminal underworld. With the Hooligans 1 and 2, the two books that were written about a decade ago. I've got both of them. Um, and yeah, there are, open. It's a murky world where the football hooligan firms and the ultras in Europe have actual links to organised crime, and in certain parts of Europe, the paramilitaries from the Balkans that were involved in the Yugoslav wars. There is an actual link with organised criminals and paramilitaries, and it's a very murky underworld. There's the lines blur completely. So when you're watching, Rise of a Foot Soldier, especially the first one, with when the ICF, I actually have met a couple of guys from the old ICF, and I've met a couple of the guys from the old 635 crew, Portsmouth firm. There was a lad who used to work the doors at a pub I used to work at. Their manager, he used to work the doors as well. He's either in his 50s at the point. He's got the old 635 tattoo on his inside his thumb. Because they used to leave platform 3. So you've got 3 dots, platform 3 at Portsmouth. Was it Portsmouth? Portsmouth and South Sea or Portsmouth Harbour? I think it's Portsmouth and South Sea. Platform 3. They used to get the train from there to go up north, for example. And I know, I've come across some of the old ICF from the 80s, friends' parents and uncles and friends of friends. And when you worked in the pub game and you worked in the nightclub game as actually a barman, you get to meet people. I didn't like the Sean Bean one, no. That was the worst one of the lot. Even though it was the one which had the highest budget, that was the one that actually had the highest budget, but is the worst one of the lot, and is the one with the least truth in it. Because there's a lot of, when you have films based on real life events, they do tend to fictionalize certain aspects, or the timeline isn't exactly the same. So the Rise of a Foot Soldier timeline's all over the place. When in reality, the way they've done the series of films, they switch the timeline around with the series of films not actually being in the order of series of events. Don't know how that works, but it works well when you look at the storyline, you actually read the facts, and meet people. And there's a lot of people. I mean, I've been to book signings. I've read a lot of the research. I've read a lot of the books about it. I've watched a lot of the documentaries. I've got all the films. You know, I've met a lot of people who've been involved with the football hooligan fraternity, and there's a couple of there's one that I work with who used to be in the Coventry firm back in the 70s and 80s. He looks young for his age, just to say that. He's pushing 60. He doesn't look 60. He looks like 40. But you can see some of the chunks taken out of his head. And then one day when I'm shaking the air. um, so you come across people, um, and when you live not that far from London, where a lot of the firms are based, and I go into London a fair bit. Over my life, I've been to London a fair bit, and I've got friends in London. I've got family friends in London, and you get a yeah. And when you follow the sport as religiously as I do, and you know you've got friends who are actively involved in the sport, as fan groups and in working actually at clubs, and you get to meet people. I haven't actually socialised for years though, but before COVID, I used to go London quite regularly. I used to go, you know, Reading quite regularly. I used to go down, Bournemouth quite regularly, all over the place with work, up to the West Midlands. COVID happens, and then that changes. But the best one I remember was a member of the Leighton Orient firm staggered into my mate's pub and he'd been stabbed with a golf club. Yeah, he'd been stabbed with a broken golf club. I'm thinking, how the what? Trust me. Uh, yeah, because when Leighton Orient got relegated out of the Football League, the Reading firm decided to go up to Maidenhead and join forces with the local thugs of Maidenhead, which is the thing. And a couple of the firm had turned up with golf clubs, and this Orient thug um, had, had been shanked with a broken golf club. And then two of the Reading lads had also been involved with the golf clubs, and they also had been shanked with a couple of broken golf clubs. And then we went around the corner, and the Metropolitan Police match day commander who come down with Thames Valley didn't know what road he was on. And I'm just outside my friend's pub having a cigarette, and he comes up the corner, and I poke the end. There's broken golf clubs in the road, and there's quite a bit of claret. And he goes, "What road am I on?" And I said, "What?" It's like, "Are you the commanding officer?" And he was like, "Yes." "You don't know where you are?" He went, "No." "And I should help you because," it's like, "It's York Road. You're on the York Road home entrance. The away entrance is on the parallel road the other side." I had to basically just, it was funny. But there's a guy just walking down the road with half a golf club sticking out of him. It was weird. Golf club shaft. So you've been speared there. All I could do was just in amazement. It walks into my mate's pub, and then very, very quickly, the locals in the pub, we carried him out and handed him over to the authorities. I went, I think you might want to take him to the local hospital, which is Wexham. So they'll probably give him sepsis, but you want to take him there. And a lot of the Orient fans were drinking in my mate's pub, and they were like, "Oh, it's this guy. Oh, no, oh God." And they didn't want to be associated with the hooligan element. They just were there to have a quick pint, bugger, watch the game, and then come after the game, have another quick pint, and get on their way. Um, it was lawless. It was hilarious. The police had no idea, um, because at that level of football, they weren't expecting, as many Orient fans to run amok around Maidenhead. It was hilarious. They smashed the town centre to pieces. You've got a lot of East Enders smashing the home counties to pieces, and the local police didn't have a clue how to deal with it. It was actually mildly amusing, and then you realise actually, well, these guys are kicking lumps out of each other. That's someone's son, that's someone's brother, and he's got a golf club shaft sticking out of his gut, basically. It's like, Christ. That's a fun Saturday for you. You're going to be in A&E for an hour, and you're going to be in hospital for a while. You've been stabbed with. How can someone be stabbed with a golf club? Please enlighten me. I've heard something. I've been hit with a golf. I've been hit around the head with a golf club. I've never been stabbed with one. Interesting change of weapon there from club to spear, but that happened. I've seen some stuff at football. I remember a Southampton. Was it Southampton? Who was Southampton playing? Southampton Fulham. Southampton Fulham match, and these two women were having a fight with each other, and the copper just did not know what to do. He was like, "Do I what?" And he was calling, he was pleading for backup, and he was pleading for a couple of female officers to get him out of the situation. These two, they were both. I think were they both Southampton or Fulham? I can't remember. But they were taking lumps out of each other. They did not care. These two, they were both. I think were they both Southampton or Fulham? I can't remember. But they were taking lumps out of each other. They did not care. They were not happy. And the walk to St Mary's is not a particularly nice by the railway. That is a if you go to Fratton Park, your car will sink in the car park. If you go to what is now the Select Car Leasing Stadium for Reading, the former Medeski, one of the overflow car parks is onto industrial wasteland. Your car will sink there as well. And it's right by Reading Tip, and it's right by the sewage works. So your car's going to be covered in seagull shit. It's fact. So make sure you don't have metallic paint because it will peel. And you don't use the nice car, you use this buy an old clapped out banger. Some of this Vicarage Road is a night. Watford's a nightmare for parking, and I didn't enjoy going to what the game. The stadium itself is fantastic, but getting to the stadium, I didn't enjoy that. That's not the best stadium to get to. Once you're in the stadium, it's fantastic. I remember one of the last times I actually went to Vicarage Road was the day that Matt Jansen had his motorcycle accident and had his brain injury. I remember that. It was on the radio because he'd been dropped from. Because you always listen to Five Live or Talk Sport on the radio on the after the game, because obviously all the other results come in. They only give you a certain amount of results on the big screen board, and they go, and get in the car, you turn the radio on, and Matt Jansen had not been selected for the Blackburn team that day, which is surprising because he was one of our best players at the time. He'd been. I'm thinking, why is Graham Souness got Matt Jansen? And you're listening on the radio, thinking, why is Souness dropped him? Why is he not selected him? And then they mentioned that he'd been involved in a motorcycle accident the night before, and he'd had very serious injuries, which later transpired to be a broken leg, and he fractured his skull, and he was in intensive, he was in coma, seriously ill, and he was never quite the same player after that. I mean, admittedly, he did score in the League Cup final with his metal leg. I think he scored the winner in the League Cup final against Spurs. And it was seen as a great comeback. It was fantastic. He was never the same player. He never was the same player. You could see that his actual physical health had been impacted. He was never the same player. He could never play at that elite level. But winning that League Cup final, I think, was his rehabilitation. I think that was the end of his rehabilitation. I think that was his moment. And I think the team won that League Cup final for him, considering that less than the year before he nearly died. I mean, he could have lost his leg, and if failing that, he could have actually died with the head injury that could have killed him. That was I remember that quite vividly on the radio. So coming out, I think was the ruling, and the first day the rule was in place, gets sent off, and I think it was an FA Cup game as well, and it was the first that had been a booking with a winning goal. I think it was like a 3-2 or a 4-3 or something. It was a thrilling game. And again, I remember these things. It's like the old. I remember, like, where were you when Germany beat Brazil 7-1? I was at the pub for the first two goals. The third, fourth, and fifth goal, I thought the TV had broken. So I remember the people say, "Where were you in Brazil, Germany 7-1?" I watched the first. I missed the first goal because I was queuing at the bar, but I heard the goal go in. I actually heard a commentary. I saw the second goal, and I was like, "Oh, I was at home because I hadn't been well. I was waiting to have an operation. And I was really not feeling very well, and I was not very well. And I remember watching the drop. I went round my grandparents for the day to watch. There were certain moments in sport where you go, "Oh, that's where I was." Um, but yeah, so yeah, I mean, when the 2014 Champions League final, I was on a date down a pub. There you go. I was on a date down a pub, and it was a 4-1, and then the football was on. I said, "Do you mind if I watch it?" And there's a sporting moment that I remember. Um, I remember USA 92 it's playing, so I think Wales going nuts. Oh dear. Well, apparently the chat game one. I don't know. Uh, yeah. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna have to call it a day. I think the internet's packed in. I think it's just not cooperating. So